Yeah. Right.
Hello all, I'm Shirley Ghosh, part of the Legasis team, and on behalf of Legasis family, I welcome you all to celebrate World Environment Day in association with Environmental Management Center LLP. Every year on the 5th of June, we celebrate the World Environment Day. Today, we have gathered together to spread awareness about the environment and the need to conserve Mother Earth. It is quite simple, as when we conserve the environment today, the future generations will be able to lead a healthier life. World Environment Day is the perfect opportunity to make people aware of the issues we are facing and how one can contribute to saving it. Thus, it is quite important in its own way. In this context, let me quote Mahatma Gandhi: "The earth has enough resources for our need, but not for our greed." This year's World Environment Day has the most relevant and apt theme: Only One Earth. Today, we have with us Dr. Madhav Chitli sir, water expert and first Indian recipient of Stockholm Water Prize in 1993. He will be interacting with us to share his thoughts on water. We also have very distinguished environmental stalwarts, legal experts, and enforcement experts with whom we will have a detailed panel discussion. We have an interesting session intermittently, which have been curated by our next generation, who will share their feelings and highlight their efforts to preserve the environment. I also take this platform as an opportunity to inform all of you that our action of no plastic at Legasis has been registered on the official website of the UN Environment Programme, UNEP. I welcome all the environmental specialists, ESG leaders, legal and compliance professionals, and students across all sectors globally who has joined us today to celebrate this day in a promising manner. Now, let me welcome Mr. Arun Kulkarni sir, Chairman and Non-Executive Director of Legasis Private Limited. He has an experience of over 45 years of leadership in the engineering, pharmaceuticals, logistics, and legal tech industries. He has handled many landmark projects in logistics industry. He has vast experience in handling compliance and regulatory matters. Arun sir is also a mentor. He is a member of the Board of Studies and the RRC Committee of Kirti P. Mehta School of Law at NMIMS University, Mumbai. I welcome you, sir, and request you to address our guests accordingly. Over to you, Arun sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I take great pleasure in welcoming you all to this virtual event of celebration of World Environment Day on behalf of Legasis Group of Companies. This is one of the many initiatives our company has been taking to align itself to global events and associated activities. We strongly believe the environment and its protection is one of the biggest challenges the entire world is facing today. Legasis, from its founding stage, has been offering compliance solutions to its clients. It is our sincere effort to help our clients in meeting and achieving environmental regulatory compliance as well as statutory compliance, and thereby maintain the sustainability. Our compliance solutions cover environmental related laws in depth. We are also now actively involved in ESG and related compliances. As you know, 50 years back, on 5th of June, UN General Assembly advised members through its resolution to observe this day as World Environment Day to mark respect for the environment we live in. In 1973, UN came with a theme, One Earth, just to emphasize the uniqueness of planet Earth. Over 5 decades, humanity chasing development did not realize the progress to achieve more and more affluence to the nations was damaging nature and its ecosystems. In the last 50 years, encroachment or attacks on the environment have been so severe that World Economic Forum had to make a note of it. And it's in its global risk report of 2022 had to report the environment risk as the biggest threat for both on the short term and the long term basis. Climate change being related risks also account for these for three top risks by severity in the next 10 years. Climate action failure, extreme weather, biodiversity loss are the factors. World Environment Day advocates transformative environmental change on a global scale with a spotlight on climate action, nature action, and pollution action, while encouraging everyone everywhere to live sustainably. I may like to refer some data available here, which is indeed alarming and frightening. If nations and their leaders do not take corrective measures right now, we will lead this planet to disaster and make future generations suffer from irreparable damages. We have no right to do so. See some of the shocking statistics I will reveal. They are in the public domain. They say air pollution kills over 7 million people each year. Close to 63 million people in the US don't have access to clean water. Mind you, this is one of the most developed nations in the world. In India, leave alone clean water, there is a huge shortage of drinking water. Many big cities and many big towns, villages suffer and they are in a drought-like situation. 37% of global methane comes from the factory. Two new cars hit the road every second. Imagine a hike of consumption in the oil and the pollution thereafter. 85% of the textile ends up in dump. 70% of greenhouse gas emissions come from the meat and dairy industry. In the UK, which is another developed country, air pollution causes 40,000 deaths every year. In India, people suffer from respiratory diseases and the related diseases after that, and the health issues continue. India is the third largest emitter of the carbon dioxide in the world, not including the European Union, emitting 2.3 gigatons of carbon dioxide in 2015. This is the last number I could find out. While the two larger emitters, the United States and the China, had a decrease in emissions in 2015, whereas India increased its emission by 5.2. Now, of course, alternate energy options are being encouraged in India, including biofuel and clean energy vehicles. Human impact on the environment, as statistics show, come from the massive industries like mines, airlines, and the transportation. All the three industries are very vital for economy in a developing stage. Humanity has destroyed over half the world tropical forest since 1960s. Every 6 seconds, we lose a soccer field-sized area of rainforest. Brazil alone lost 218,000 square miles of tree cover between 2001 to 2019. We have deforesting of the earth for centuries, but that has a domino effect, causing constantly a growing number of endangered animals. Biodiversity is another issue on this planet. Let's remember, Earth is not meant only for human being. It is also for the other animals and the entire animal world. There are very horrifying stories across the world beyond what I said, because the list is unending. Global warming is the direct impact of the above. Deserts now are experiencing rains and snowfalls. Massive floods are destroying the cities and villages in all continents. Extreme fluctuations in weather is taking toll on lives of human beings as well as animals across the world. I believe it's time for every citizen, every corporate entity, and every government stop discussing environmental risks and the theoretical solutions and start taking actions to protect and preserve nature. The future generations will not forgive us if we continue to mess around with the environment on this basis. If each one of us deal at its level with environment with a sense of responsibility, Mother Earth will be as beautiful as it was before. We at Legasis have stopped using plastic bottles as a small contribution to support measures to protect environment. As part of celebration, we have interesting panel discussions, and some of the next generation members will also express their views because they are the people who are going to live for tomorrow's world. We are privileged and honored to have Dr. Madhav Chitli, an eminent scientist of global repute, sharing his valuable thoughts in conservation of water with my colleague, Mr. Upendra Parki. I do hope, and I'm sure the biggest takeaway from this session is to hear his views on a very important resource on Earth, that is water, its conservation. With this, I wish everyone attending this webinar or the event extremely happy viewing time, and also enjoy what has been discussed. Let's take a pledge that this Earth becomes livable, beautiful, and we leave it to the next generation in a very extremely good condition so that they can live forever. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time and attending our webinar. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Arun sir, for your precious words. I hope that all of us has taken a note of the pledge that he has just mentioned. As I mentioned in Legasis, we have taken the pledge of no to plastic. So moving on, taking his words and understanding that how the environment is not just for us, but also for our future generation, we need to take a note and keep it safe for them. So moving on, as we all know that outside of our homes is the actual home we all live in, and preserving it for future generation is more crucial than ever. Now, we have a very important guest who has connected with us to share her thoughts on the environment and how she is doing her bit to preserve the same. She has also made a thoughtful project on the very common game of snakes and ladders, which we will see accordingly. Now, let me introduce Ms. Saira Sharma, aged 7 years, who lives in London and is the granddaughter of Mr. Ramesh Sharma, Executive Director, Legasis Private Limited.
If he didn't save the planet and he just broke it, then there'll be no trees, and then that means there'll be so little people on the planet, and nature would not even exist. We have this board game I made called Save the Planet, so I'm gonna tell you how you learn about saving the planet using snakes and ladders. When you go up the ladders, it says something good for the planet, so you can learn about something good for the planet, and you go down the snake, it says something bad for the planet, so you have to go down the snake because you've done something bad in that. Also, these mystery cards tell you some more ideas to save the planet and to not save the planet. For example, it could say, amazing, thank you for not driving to school. Move ahead 2 spaces, and the bad cards, for example, it can be, how rude, you just threw away my good clothes. Move back 4 spaces. So these are for saving the planet.
So herein we see that how the board game was made, and this is the snake. So if you do something wrong for the environment, you have to go down the snake. But we also have the ladder, wherein we do something good for the environment, we climb up the ladder. This is how the magic cards are, wherein you get rewards if you do something good for the environment. So she has made a very thoughtful project on this game. As we see, she has also mentioned about the good deeds in the magic cards. And this is how her effort is to save the planet. So let us all thank Saira so that, we take her thought and we look forward to climb the ladder and make the environment a better place. Moving on to our next segment where we have with us Dr. Madhav Chitli. It gives me immense pride to get an opportunity to introduce Dr. Madhav Maram Chitley, the man who made India see water as a resource. He played a major role in getting India's decision makers and strategic planners to think of water as a resource whose quality and availability need to be safeguarded. He was the first Indian to internationally put forth the idea of signaling March 2022 as the World Water Day at the Rio de Janeiro United Nations Conference on Environment and Development 1992. He is first Indian recipient of Stockholm Water Prize in 1993 for his contribution to the conservation of the world's water resource and public education programs. He has served Maharashtra State Engineering Service and central government in Water Resource Department in various capacities and projects. He was also appointed as Secretary, Ministry of Water Resources, Government of India from 1989. He also became Secretary General of International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage during 1993 till 1997. He has been a member of the United Nations Environment Programme's Water Advisory Committee. As part of the nationwide programs to cover several rivers, Dr. Chitley was one of those who originated of the Ganga Action Plan to improve the waters of the holy water. He has written a couple of books, including Jal Tarang. Presently, he is associated with a number of voluntary organizations on water. Let me also welcome Mr. Upendra Parkhi, who is an experienced professional in environment management, climate change, safety, occupational health, sustainability, and ESG with proven track records in 34 years of work experience. After completing environmental engineering from Shivaji University in 1987, he worked in the iron and steel, infrastructure, and power industry. Presently, he is associated with Legasis for offering ESG services to the customer's need and expectations. Now let us see Dr. Chitley's thought on the same.
Namaskar. It is my pleasure and I am very much delighted personally and from the Legasis point of view that a person sitting next to me is Dr. Madhav Maram Chitli, who is the first Indian recipient of the Stockholm Water Prize in 1993. He is a person who has given the World Water Day on 22nd March every year. Sir, welcome and thanks for giving this opportunity. So I will have some questions with you and it will be useful for all our clients and customers.
It will be a great opportunity to talk about the important subject of water.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Thanks. Sir, you have always stressed that water is a resource. So do you feel that water is being used as a resource at present? And most important is that if it is not, what is the reason for the not using it appropriately, and what really we need to do? Is it like that linking of rivers or the water pricing similar to the carbon pricing? Such mechanisms are important at present.
Water is partly a resource in a very limited sense because water is all pervading and it's a part of environment and it is a circulating element of the environment. Compared to, for example, earth is also a natural element, but the natural earth or soil, they don't circulate, whereas water circulates.
Yes.
And therefore it connects the other elements including the life pattern on this earth, and that is why water has become so important and is receiving so much of attention.
But sir, really at present water is being managed according, you feel?
No, because of various reasons, there is no economic parity in the different segments of the society as well as in the different parts of the world. Some are far behind in the technological sense, in the organizational sense, whereas some societies are far ahead, like Canada for example, Japan another example, who are organizing their water in a really meaningful manner and have established success patterns in how to manage urban water, agricultural water, industrial water. In India, we have a long way to go still.
In your opinion, what needs to be done by industry?
Fortunately, industrial water is relatively more easy to handle because it is a concentrated type of discharge from the industry, and it is not distributed like the urban drainage or the sewerage that is distributed over a large area. Therefore, collecting that sewerage or the undesirable part of water itself is a big task. Relatively in industries, because the outflow from the industry is already regulated, already collected together, and therefore the treatment of that water and disposal of that water is relatively organizationally and technologically very easy. Now the difficult technological part of the industrial effluent is because of some of the high temperature, high pressure industries, they produce some chemicals. Those cannot be digested in the environment, and the high pressure, high temperature outputs of the industry, they are the real difficult part in the environment.
Thank you, sir. Sir, but again, we'll come back to, like, you have experience for Ganga Action Plan or even the thoughts of the linking of rivers. How those will be helpful to the Indian context or basically the waterways and reducing the carbon footprint as well?
In the Indian context, in our developmental path, managing the basin itself and the local resources is our step one, including groundwater. Then linking that basin where there is shortage of water with the basin which has ample water, that is our step two. And then making a complete national grid out of it is our final goal. And our Central Water Commission has already worked on this, and they have established feasible economically as well as technologically feasible roughly 30 such river links. So in India, our ultimate goal, as we keep on developing and the need for water keeps on increasing, will be one day we will be linking these rivers so that there is a complete grid pattern of the interlinked rivers, and the shortage areas are covered by transfer of water from the surplus areas.
So it will be helpful not only to the farmers but to industry and urbanization as well.
Yes, it will be helpful to three entities. First is our urban development today is one of the fastest areas of development. So they will have assured supply of water that will improve the health of the citizens, that will improve our urban life. It will give assured supply and a stable base for industries to get established. Particularly many industries require a large quantity of water. And of course agriculture requires very large quantity compared to urban and industrial demand. So all these sectors will get well established, and particularly our industrial growth will be accelerated by the interlinking of rivers, because this fear of shortage of water, industries cannot be established on a short-term basis. There has to be a long-term view. So for that long-term view, interlinking of rivers will be very useful.
But sir, these rivers will also helpful for the flood management by linkage and other areas?
Really speaking, not much. Because our flood-prone area, we are keeping India in our view first. Our flood-prone areas are getting their floods not only from the Indian territory but from the Himalayan territory, Nepal, its background area. And those floods are very high. And to manage those floods is not within the capabilities of our ground management techniques. And managing the clouds in the sky is still not a possible venture.
Yeah.
Therefore, we'll have to live with the floods. Therefore, those who are working on the flood management, their slogan is learn to live with the floods rather than learn to manage the floods. Floods cannot be managed.
Sir, then do you feel that at water pricing, like charging, because at present water is basically free, only the cost of treatment and supply is charged to the consumers. So do you feel that pricing a given certain amount of charges to the water is important aspect?
That is one of the first fundamental changes we have to generate in the Indian psychological setup. Somehow in our traditional cultural setup, water is being respected highly, and therefore water is being treated as a free good from the nature.
God's gift.
God's gift, which is not so. And particularly pure water, pollution-free water, that needs to be achieved. And achieving that needs many more complicated arrangements, socially as well as technologically. And that means some cost. And the society has to be ready to bear that cost. Then only we can achieve our goal of normal water, clean water.
Now with this urbanization, the water gets polluted because of sewage and other things. So the lot of action is being done on large scale as well as from the local hutments or the industry part of view. But we have not achieved the goal as on date. So what do you feel about it? Is we have to expedite the actions, or it is a very slow process going on?
So fortunately, it is not moving up with the speed with which our other economy is growing.
That's it.
So as the economy grows, the waste from the economic activities, including industrial activities and agricultural activities, that waste part also keeps on increasing. And managing that waste part, whether it is wastewater or the urban dry refuge, these are the real challenges which our upcoming generation will have to handle successfully to keep our country clean.
That is most important. And Indore Shahar, I think you are staying at present, is one of
Fortunately, we are staying in Indore, which has been bestowed the sort of a proud privilege of being the cleanest city today, at least in India.
Sir, in your career, you have handled lots of projects, critical situations like Panchet Dam collapse, and the most important project is Bombay water supply systems. Sir, in all those large mega projects, you are very particular about the impacts on environment and the society. And sir, do you feel this impact needs to be managed very critically? And this rehabilitation and resettlement and development of downstream facility are how important as far as the society's benefit is considered?
It is very difficult to generalize because we have water short areas like the drought prone areas of Andhra Pradesh or Maharashtra or Karnataka or Bundelkhand also, where bringing additional water will be beneficial. But we have areas with excessive water like Assam area or the north of Bihar, where existence of more water is a problem.
Yeah.
And therefore water removal or drainage is an issue. That is why even the international organization which looks into these problems of irrigation is not only titled as Irrigation Commission, but Irrigation and Drainage Commission, because along with irrigation we have also to look into the issues associated with excess water, and therefore draining that excess water is also a need today as well as will be continuing in the future also. And therefore drainage is an essential part of water supply arrangement.
But sir, while implementing these mega projects, definitely some settlement needs to be shifted, or some area gets submerged. So the impacts are there on society. So how you feel that the industry or the mega projects by the government, how they can manage or minimize the impact on the society because of resettlement or rehabilitation process?
Fortunately, now that general opposition or misunderstanding or wrong propaganda about the water development projects has subsided substantially, but it is very easy to remember that in a climate as given to us by God, we get water in roughly between 10 to 40 days out of 365 days. But we need water for 365 days. So this water needs to be stored first. And for storing that water, depending on our economic development, agricultural development, industrial development, you require large storages. Then only it is possible to develop economically. So an appropriate climate needs to be generated. Fortunately, after some initial setback, now that developmental climate has been generated in India, and now we don't hear any opposition moves or andolans, so to say, against the project. Projects are going on now very smoothly. But our ultimate target is, because the nature has not given water equitably throughout the Indian territory, we will have to link our rivers and transfer water from water surplus rivers to water deficit rivers. And roughly the Central Water Commission has identified 30 such links, and work is going on those links. And now we are in Madhya Pradesh. So Ken Betwa, that first link project is already in the initial phases of implementation. Similarly in Andhra Pradesh, Godavari and Krishna link, Polavaram, that is also under implementation. So out of those 30 links, 2 are already in the process of implementation. Others will follow depending on the urgency and the economic development, because water transfer is a very costly business. First you have to store, and then you have to transfer it over long distances to the deficit areas, and then maintain those water channels or pipe system. Everything ultimately costs money. So depending on the willingness of the beneficiary society to pay for the service, these facilities will grow fast. Fortunately now the Indian climate is not as bad as it was 20-30 years back. There was a lot of opposition to such ventures, but now the society is much more receptive to such large projects, and I hope this will continue over the next 2-3 decades.
Is it because that people understood that such a large projects also create wealth and the prosperity of the region or the country?
Wealth and very favorable climate around, living around the lake is very healthy even otherwise, because we are in a dry arid area. India is basically a dry arid area, and therefore presence of water itself smoothens out your life pattern, and that is a welcome thing. Now that the society has understood the benefits, our projects are moving very fast.
I think that is very important, that implementation of the project at speedy level and first time successfully is the real key for the prosperity of the area and the country. So moving to the next question, sir, it is like you have worked in government areas for so many years, and you are aware that India, we have a number of legislations on water and environment. And even in the at present there is a green tribunal, and green tribunal is also utilizing its judgment and penalizing the polluters. So even after 75 years of independence, if the basic legal compliances are not met, do you feel that there is a need to do something by the industry or by the policy makers so that the sustainable development goal of 2030 given by United Nations is definitely achieved?
See, before the environmental laws or acts, we need a water policy. Unfortunately, India has very clearly written out national water policy. And after 15 years of experience in implementing that policy, we ourselves have slightly revised it also. So we are now in the process of implementing the improved or revised water policy. And the acts and laws, they are within this framework of policy, because that policy sets out your goals, the direction in which you are moving. And as the society's pattern is changing, we are in a great process of urbanization and great process of technologically managed agriculture. Now, for example, drip irrigation, sprinkler irrigation, they are the new patterns of agriculture. This is not the old agriculture which was 50 years back. So to handle this agriculture in a technological sense, including now the greenhouses. Now much of our vegetables, they are expected to be produced from the greenhouses throughout the year. Even if in the summer we get green vegetable because of these greenhouses. So our life pattern, our economic pattern, the overall style of managing our resources like water is changing. And the new generation which is coming up on a well-trained scientific basis, our educational patterns have changed, and therefore the new generation is much more scientifically oriented than it was 50 years back. So they don't live on emotions now. In the past 50 years back, to generate an emotional climate and resistance to projects was easy. Now it's not going to be that easy, because the new generation is technologically very well grounded, and therefore they understand the importance of natural resources, including water.
Yeah, but sir, just I mean coming to back, there still you find some of the bridges into that, and then the matters comes to the court or the green tribunals and similar areas where the industries are punished or polluters are asked to pay. So I think it should be minimized, or it should be reduced, or it should not happen like at present with the present technology. And
see, the user has to pay has been the philosophy of the new economic development world over, and therefore that is a fact of life. Now the quantity of water used in agriculture, quantity of water used in different types of industries, the quantity of water used in urban life or in the rural area, per capita, per head, that differs, and therefore the pricing cannot be the same in Assam and say in Tamil Nadu. The pricing has to change with reference to your general environmental setup, depending on how much water you are going to draw from nature and in what manner are you going to return it back to nature. Are you going to return it in a polluted way, or you are going to treat it, clean it and then return to the nature? This latter part is now slowly catching up. It will take next about 20 years before we are as clean as say Japan or Germany, where all treated water is only discharged and no unclean water is let out back to the nature.
yeah, even presently the concept is also to reuse 100%. So basically not to discharge anything in nala or the ground or the surface areas. The last 2 years it's a very difficult period because of COVID-19, and definitely industries, individuals, they've also faced a very different situation or a first time experience as such. So during this period, these industries have shifted basically from revenue or profit to the environment, social and governance performance measurement, because the revenue and profit has taken a back seat. And it was one of the important parameters for corporates to remain sustainable in risky period or the situations. So what do you feel is the learning from COVID and the company performance on the wave of ESG? You can say.
See, finally the industries also need social acceptance, and that social acceptance depends on how the industries handle the effluents, including the gases which emit from the industries. Fortunately, now industries are very well geared technologically and more or less even financially to handle these matters. So, in the future, the impacts are not going to be adverse, but because the word impact is that way is a misnomer. The impact can be adverse, the impact can be advantageous also.
Positive.
So the existence of industry is going to be more advantageous as we progress in our developmental activities in India.
So do you feel that the sustainable activities performance measurement, like the sustainability disclosures or the ESG disclosure, which is a present trend, is very important for the industry to remain?
Some problems will remain. For example, there is a problem of what is known as persistent chemicals. Because some of our chemicals like paints, for example, or even pharmaceutical preparations, they are high pressure, high temperature outputs of the industry. And nature cannot digest high pressure, high temperature outputs because the nature is much more sober than the industrial temperatures and industrial pressures. So nature cannot digest those chemicals. So persistent chemicals is going to be a problem which is still not fully solved. Our chemists, our engineers, industries are working on how to reduce the emergence of persistent chemicals. But it's still a problem. That persistent chemicals is going to stay as a problem at least over the next 2 decades. People are working on it, scientists are working on it, but less the persistent chemicals, cleaner will be the environment.
And definitely the monitoring and measurement of the performance is important.
Right.
Sir, at one level, circularity is considered as a culturally aligned to Indian ethos. And so do you feel that India have an inherent advantage of embracing, propagating and embedding principles of circular economy? Whatever we do. And what should be our agenda and action plan, especially for Indian corporates?
See, fortunately, India has a long cultural tradition, and in that cultural tradition, even days like Kojagiri Purnima, Tripuri Purnima, or Vatta Purnima now, because we are in those heat days.
Yeah.
So Vatta Purnima itself shows the way India wants to move.
Yeah.
That tree growth, shade, and shady trees, not eucalyptus. That has been our objective, to create shade and cool climate. So India has a cultural history which helps Indian people to understand the environmental requirement in a much more positive manner. And that is an Indian asset, and we have to develop this asset and work further in that direction.
Yeah, so circular economy is also going to be very important as far as waste management is concerned, like waste to energy or the revised car policy, where all the cars can be scrapped and used as a raw material for the steel plants. So these directions are the right directions, do you feel?
The circulatory economy is a global need,
Yeah.
and the fortunate part is the advanced countries, including Korea, for example, Japan, the United States, France, they are moving very fast in this direction of circulatory economy, and therefore you don't see now heaps or hills of either garbage or even used cars nowadays. There are many laws in the different countries which require you to process that part of your industry also in a proper manner, so that it comes back into the social or the economic stream of the society, and there are not only heaps of waste that are dumped around the city. So globally the picture is changing. Indian industrial development compared to other industrialized world is still at a low key comparatively, and therefore we have not faced those problems in that aggressive manner as other countries have faced. So we have to learn much from the other countries who have already started handling these problems, and I am sure because of the technology-oriented new curricula that are coming up in our engineering colleges, our next generation will be capable of handling these technological challenges in a much more confident manner than in the past.
And so even this waste management, it also helps in ensuring the cleaner and clean environment, and also the employment generation in a different field. Sir, what is your experience working with the international forums like WRI, UNEP?
See, international forum has a great advantage that it can bring together experience from the developed countries, advanced countries, to the developing countries. And that interchange facility is a great advantage in the overall global development as such. And fortunately, the United Nations and their organizations like UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, or UNDP, United Nations Development Program, they are doing very, very good work in this direction. And we are much better, globe as a whole, now than what the globe as a whole, earth as a whole, we were 50 years back. So the situation is definitely very promising.
But how you felt working with those groups?
We are a part of that group. We are a very active member of the United Nations, either it is UNESCO, for example, where United Nations science and technology is being discussed and implemented in the university. So we are a part of that system and we are benefiting from that system. We are drawing advantage or lessons from the type of arrangements they have introduced in their educational pattern. We are also trying to learn from that. And our next generation is not going to be the same as it was 25 years back. Next generation is going to be much more technologically prepared than what it used to be in the past.
Sir, you also got the Stockholm Water Prize in 1993. So what was your feeling while receiving this award?
See, 60 years back, I received this in 93.
93.
And 60 years back, that is in 33, the Nobel Prize was received by C.V. Raman.
Yeah.
So when this prize is given, it is like the India Water Week in Stockholm, because wherever the prize laureate goes, there the Indian flag is hoisted.
Yeah.
So even our ambassador there, thereafter wrote an article in Indian Express as India Week in Stockholm. So it gives you not only personal pleasure or personal satisfaction, but it gives your country a name. At what level that country's scientific and technological and managerial development is going. So I was very happy that India was recognized as one of the achieving societies, and not only a learning society, but an achieving society. And therefore India has established its mark in this manner in different fields, and now we are being respected world over.
Thank you, sir. Sir, also the World Water Day is being observed every year. So now how you feel it about it? It is continuing, its importance is growing?
Now the World Water Day is catching up very, very well, and now it is catching up in the different fields, including agriculture, including urban, where India is particularly lagging is in our organizational capacity to handle our small catchments, our river basins, because they need to be systematically organized so that the entire basin gets the benefit of your technological know-how and the capabilities in keeping the environment clean. So we have that capability, but still we are lagging in our organizational skills, and administratively we are still psychologically linked up with tehsils or districts, but environmentally district is not an entity, but basin is an entity. A watershed is a basin here. Now the requirement of the future is that you don't get only organized politically or administratively as a tehsil or a district, but you get organized as a watershed, you get organized as a basin or a sub-basin. That is where the future challenge is. And somehow in India we are still lagging in that direction.
We have to learn about it and we should improve upon that. Sir, you are still active, you are working with the organization. So what is your future plan? And
See, organizing our society around the topic like water and environment at large on a watershed basis or a basin basis, that is our main work for the next 20-25 years. So we have movements in the different parts of our country, like Sarovar Samvardhini, means around the lake we have to organize the society in such a manner that the waste from that society does not pollute that lake permanently. On similar pattern, we have to organize our watersheds, we have to organize our basins also. Now, larger the size of the basin, more difficult it is to handle that. So we have to start from the smaller watershed and move upwards so that we get a much cleaner environment in the basin as a whole, starting from the small watershed. We are in that process. There are some success stories, but they are very few compared to the size of the country. And country as a whole, the climate is also very diverse. In Assam, the problem is not the same as in Hyderabad, for example. The management of areas around Hyderabad has to be on a very different footing than those at Trivandrum, for example, in Kerala. So because of this diverse climatic setup, we will have to encourage the upcoming of different patterns of management. One pattern will not solve the entire national problem.
yes, sir, that is very true. Sir, behind every successful man there is a strong woman. So Vijayata is with you. So what do you feel about her contribution? And even she has written a book, Suvarna Kirane. What do you want to say about it?
That book fortunately has been very well received in the publishing world. And there are many readers and we get the feedback. And the feedback itself is so overwhelming that the collection of feedback itself will be a book. People have liked that book. And I hope she keeps writing more.
And what do you want to say about her contribution for your success?
See, particularly in the earlier part of the engineer's career, you had to stay outside the urban society, in distant areas, in remote areas, even in forest areas. And there she accompanied me without any hesitation, and that was a part of the success.
Sir, now World Environment Day is being celebrated on 5th June. So what is your message to our industrial entities or the professionals working in those industrial entities and people in large?
We have not yet been able to generate the feeling, the psychological setup that we are a part of the environment. So we receive the environment as well as we also make an impact on the environment. It works both ways. And that psychology needs to be generated. Fortunately, in our cultural tradition, we have very important days like, as I mentioned, Vata Purnima, Kojagiri Purnima. They are environmental days, and they taught us culturally how we should deal or live with the environment. Now, that is one way of strengthening the psychological setup of the society, to look at the environment in a positive manner rather than in a negative manner. Much of the literature from the Western world in the context of environment that came to India was a negative literature, that all industrial activities, urban activities, they make an adverse impact on the environment. Partly it is true, but that is not the only message that needs to be given to the society. The society has to be shown the direction, has to get assimilated with the environment and live with the environment in a clean manner. And there our culture is going to help us in a big way, because we already have these environmental days, so to say, embedded in our culture, and we have to make use of those days to make the society live a cleaner life.
Yeah, that is most important message. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for such an inspiring session and sharing all the experiences with us today. The reminder of how water is God's gift and we should all work together to reach the goal of Nirmal water was also very inspiring. The examples of Japan and Germany of how water is preserved and treated water is discharged was extremely motivating as well. The ultimate aim to move towards the grid pattern of interlinked rivers, which will accelerate industrial development, was also a very great lesson for all of us today. Again, let us see another set of very inspiring video in making our environment and our life on this planet as wondrous as it should be. Join me in welcoming Ms. Freya Malhotra, aged 9 years, and Ms. Athena Malhotra, aged 2 years, who live in Singapore and who are the granddaughters of Mr. Ramesh Sharma, Executive Director, Legasis Private Limited.
Hi, my name is Freya, and I'd like to talk to you about roles we can play to save the Earth. No one is too small to make a difference. The Earth is my home, your home, and our home. It is our collective responsibility to care for and to save this beautiful planet. Let's talk about plastic on beaches. The problem is that plastic pollution can be found on every beach in the world, which is really sad. So, to do that, here are some simple solutions to make a difference. 1. You can reuse or avoid using any single-use plastic. For example, not using plastic bottles, shopping bags, or any plastic packaging material. 2. You can recycle properly, which I'm not very good at doing. And at last, you can participate in cleaning rivers or beaches, like I did, and it was really fun. Now, let's talk about the issues of water wastage. Can you believe it? In our planet, an average person not knowingly wastes about 30 gallons of water every single day, which is not good. Anyways, here are some things to do to help. 1. Turn off the water while brushing, which in fact, I get upset at Athena because she doesn't listen and she gets so annoyed and it's so sad. 2. Take shorter showers. My mom is really bad at that. 3. Use automatic dishwashers for full loads only. Little things, but they make a difference. Recycling. The problem is that non-recyclable materials are put in the trash and people don't make an effort to separate them from plastic or paper and general waste. All this stuff just ends up in landfills. So here are some quick tips to recycle. 1. Recycle paper and wood, so you can save trees and forests, like this. 2. If you recycle plastic, it means less new plastic. And 3. If you recycle glass, it reduces the need to use materials like sand. Yes, even sand is in low supply. So now you know a few ways to save our planet Earth. So, and remember, no one is too small to make a difference. So now, let's all start to do things differently from today.
Thank you, Freya, for the lovely video. And I believe we have all noted down that how she has again gave us a gentle reminder to say no to plastic, and how she mentioned that no one is small and everyone can make a difference to make the environment a better place for all of us. We have today, so moving on to the next event of the day, where we have a panel discussion with environment enthusiasts on statutory role of directors in environmental protection. Does failure to protect environment lead to directors' liabilities? I'm delighted to introduce our esteemed panelists one by one. We have with us today Dr. Prasad Modak, sir, who holds BTech Civil Engineering, MTech, Environmental Science and Engineering from Indian Institute of Technology, IIT Bombay, and Doctor of Engineering from Asian Institute of Technology, Bangkok. Dr. Modak was a professor at Center for Environmental Science and Engineering at IIT Bombay from 1984 to 1994, and later as professor adjunct at the Center for Technology Alternatives in Rural Area from 2009 to 2017. He is currently the executive president of Environmental Management Center LLP and director of eConnect Knowledge Foundation. Dr. Modak has worked with almost all key UN, multilateral and bilateral development institutions in the world. These include the World Bank, IFC, Asian Development Bank, to name a few. Dr. Modak has also published several books on environmental management. His latest book on practicing circular economy for the CRC Press was released in June 2021. We are so glad to have you with us, sir. Joining him will be Dr. Ajay Deshpande, sir, who is an environmental professional with more than 27 years of hands-on experience in environmental pollution control and governance, environmental policy and planning, urban and industrial environment management, circular economy, working in various capacities in the field of environment, including consulting organizations. Dr. Deshpande previously worked for more than 4 years as expert member with National Green Tribunal, India from 2013 to 2017, which is only third dedicated environmental justice delivery system, which has original, special, and appellate jurisdictions in the matters related to environment. Presently, Dr. Deshpande works with Asian Development Bank as part-time member of its compliance review and panel and responsible to ensure that the ADB finance projects are strictly following environmental related ADB norms and procedures. We are also very glad to have you with us, sir. We also have Mr. Ramesh Sharma, sir, who is currently serving as an executive director at Legasis Private Limited. He is a former Indian Police Service, commonly known as IPS officer with 35 years of distinguished service. He retired as Director General of Police of Madhya Pradesh, India. As DG of Economic Offences Wing and Anti-Corruption Bureau, Mr. Sharma acquired expertise in the investigation of complex and high-profile cases related to corruption, bribery, fraud, and other white-collar crimes. Passionate about training, he is a well-established speaker at various national and international conferences. He also served with distinction as a diplomat in the High Commission of India, Canada. Mr. Sharma acquired a degree in public administration from the prestigious ENA Paris that is responsible for the training of crème de la crème of the French bureaucracy. He has co-authored a book titled Combating Corruption in India, which has been published by the Cambridge University Press. Mr. Sharma is recipient of several prestigious awards, including the Prime Minister's Medal for Meritorious Service, the President's Medal for Distinguished Service, and the Police Special Duty Medal for hard and challenging postings in Jammu and Kashmir, as well as in Nagaland and Manipur. This panel will be moderated by Suhas Tulsapurkar sir, Founder Director, Legasis Private Limited. Suhas sir is a lawyer with over 37 years of experience. He acts as an independent advisor to various companies, governments, trade associations, professionals, celebrities, non-profit entities, and startups. His main area of expertise in governance, risk, assurance, compliance, and ethics, commonly known as GRACE, with a fusion of information technology. After a successful career as an in-house counsel and law firm partner in 2006, Suhas sir founded Legasis Private Limited, India's first legal tech enterprise. He has been periodically called upon by the governments to provide expertise in drafting various legislation. Suhas sir is a national school resident scholar and has received many scholarships, awards, and recognitions, including the Udyog Ratna Award. He is a blogger, a regular contributor to legal journals, and is an acclaimed speaker. On behalf of Legasis family, I warmly welcome the esteemed panelists once again and request them to share their thoughts on the same. I request all the attendees to drop their questions in the chat box if they have any, and our panelists will address them accordingly. Over to you, Suhas sir.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Dr. Modak, Dr. Deshpande. Good morning, Mr. Ramesh Sharma. Thank you very much for joining us on the occasion of the World Environment Day. We've been celebrating World Environment Day for almost past about 6 years in some form or manner. Hopefully, this will be the last digital one, and next year onwards, we'll probably go closer to the environment, closer to the nature, and try and do something differently rather than remaining in the digital space. With that, all warm wishes, a very warm welcome to everybody. And thank you very much for joining us on the World Environment Day. Our panel consists of today a very interesting profiles that we have. And I think as Shirley introduced the panel members to you, I'm going to lay down a kind of basic proposition that's bothering me as a lawyer, as a citizen concerned for environment, and you see, basically as an Indian, it is bothering me, and that's what I wanted to raise this topic and look at. The proposition being that when we introduce something in law, we introduce it with a great fanfare. We believe that introduction of a legal provision in a statute, starts off a wave of things, or we hope that there are going to be waves of things that will happen. And environment has been such a topic where I think there is no paucity of legislation per se. And that the legislative effect of those provisions being introduced at times is not what we expected at the beginning of it. One such provision, and specifically coming to the corporate sector, one such provision is Section 166 of the Companies Act. Sir, while whenever we talked about directors responsibilities, directors duties, what are directors expected to be as the fiduciaries, who do directors represent? And sir, in that context, 166 of the Companies Act 2013, effective 2014, for the first time brought in a concept. And I'm going to kind of look at and read that particular section for its context. It says, and the title of the section is Duties of Directors. It says, subject to the provisions of this act, a director of a company. And sir, I'm going to pause here and say that a company would mean a company defined under the Companies Act, which would mean whether it is private company, whether it is a listed company, whether it is unlisted company. So all joint stock companies, including those foreign companies as defined, government companies as defined. So there is no exception to any company here. So subject to the provisions of the Act, a director of a company shall act in accordance with the articles of the company. So that is the first fiduciary duty, that you have to act in accordance to the rules set by the articles of the company. Subsection 2 says a director of a company shall act in good faith in order to promote the objects of the company. Again, the duty of loyalty to the company, it's a fundamental fiduciary responsibility and a duty of a director. It goes on to say shall act in good faith in order to promote the benefits of its members as a whole. So this is acting on behalf of shareholders as a constituency. Again, duty of loyalty to say, and in the best interest of the company, its employee, shareholders, the community. So that's the stakeholders getting defined under Companies Act 2013. And very importantly, it says the director shall act for the protection of the environment. So therefore, equal to the duty to act in the best interest of the shareholders, equal to the duty to act in the interest of the company, is this duty to act for the protection of the environment. Now, many times we've realized that the companies themselves are violating the environmental norms. Where is the positive duty of the director? And in that context, sir, I wanted first your opening remarks. I'm going to start with Dr. Ajay Deshpande, then would be requesting Dr. Modak and Mr. Ramesh Sharma, sir. It's not that this is an order of preference. It's just probably, sir, alphabetically the first names are the order that I just picked it up. No
Thank
problem.
you. Thank you, Suhasji. And it is wonderful to be here and on a very important topic, which is also being debated a lot. And particularly with the changing environmental jurisprudence, particularly heavy weightage is given to the liability clause through the NGT as well as other superior courts. This topic is very relevant as of today. As we know, India is really facing challenge on multiple grounds, particularly the stress on the resources, particularly because of the increase in the population and also our aspirational values. We want to grow, we want to consume more and more resources, and this is putting a significant stress on the overall ecosystem per se. Let it be water, air, or even natural resources like coal and other things. And to meet these aspirational demands of the population, the government, any government per se, will have to think about big infrastructure projects and also various resource line up the resources. So this is putting a lot of investment into the picture also. That is one important thing. And when we think about legacy status in the country, let it be our solid waste plants, or if you see the sewage treatment plants, or even if you see the hazardous waste dump in various industrial areas or adjoining areas, this is being litigated a lot of recent, and particularly with the NGT coming in picture, people have a very easy access, and at the same time, much of the technical input is really honored and recognized in NGT. So the term damages and the liabilities is actually an everyday affair now. You open up a newspaper every day, you'll find some news of some crore penalties or something like that. But nonetheless, all the acts, water, air and environment, have both type of liability, civil and criminal. And I think for today's debate, another aspect will be the criminal liability. So with this, I think I will stop here and then we can go in more detail subsequently. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I think you emphasize the new thought process that's emerging in terms of making people responsible and liable, especially the corporate sector. And I'm going to request Dr. Modak on his first thoughts on the director's responsibility.
So, Suhas, I will put it in such a this perspective that one is, of course, the director being on the board of the company will have to ensure about the environmental compliance. That would then mean that there is a process the director will have to set it up in the organization, that there are measures taken internally to ensure that all compliances on the count of environment are met, but not just meeting those compliances as per the statutes and the standards, but a director will have to ensure that there is a management system in place which is institutionalized and documented, which will be more proactive and preventative, that the violations on compliance do not happen. Now, that is a much more responsible perspective that the director will have to take in advising the company, that not just only focus on internal monitoring and reporting to the regulator, but to ensure that there is a proper management system. And this has been the style in which most of the boards you will see, that the directors are asking the executive to ensure whether such management systems are in place. And then the compliances are met with the regulator. But what has been happening now, that the disclosure that you are performing beyond compliance has come into the interest. And if you therefore interpret the section 166, especially when you touched upon environmental protection, it then takes the director's responsibility not just to the shareholders, but to the stakeholders. And the moment you widen that canvas, it then means that the director will have to advise and take all the efforts to ensure that there is a transparency in communicating the environmental performance, and also be aligned to some of the globally recognized issues. If you look at one of the very recent documents published by Shyam Diwan and his colleagues, it's a 2021 document which talks about directors' responsibility towards climate. And the reason I'm raising this, that this is not legislated today, but yet because of that spirit of environmental protection, which has no such boundary, that we have to look at even a lens from the global perspective, it becomes necessary for the director to recognize importance of climate change and ensure that the businesses that there is an oversight the director is doing are climate informed and are climate responsive. Now, this example I wanted to cite here, that here we are talking about going beyond compliances and statutes and standards, but director's role then becomes truly oriented to the stakeholders and not limit to, as I said earlier, to the shareholders only. Now, discharging such a responsibility then would mean that the director will have to bring to the boardroom ESG, because one of the focal areas in ESG is climate action. And if that is to be brought in, and that the director is playing a role to shape the business to make it future ready, and then following all the required reporting formats, such as the TCFD or a CDP in the climate space, I believe, Suhas, that is becoming extremely important. And not many directors are necessarily enlightened to take this perspective, and often restrict the boundaries to statutory compliances. So my initial reaction, Suhas, is that we have to wake up in that sense. And not that I'm going to say that director is wholly and solely responsible, because again in Companies Act there is a collective responsibility provision. But this has to be cited and discussed in the board, making all the directors aware that they have to go beyond compliance.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for that initial response. But you covered up. You covered up right from disclosure onwards. I mean, moving to from compliance perspective per se, to actually, how can we look at ESG and how can we look at reporting and benchmarking? No, but thank you very much for that opening thoughts. I'm going to request Ramesh sir for his opening remarks when it comes to environment protection, the statutory duty of a director.
Thank you, Suhas. At the very outset, thank you for having me here among this such noted, eminent people, including you, of course. And I don't know whether I fit in the bill or not, But I would like to say at the very beginning is that, first of all, I'm here in three roles. First is as an individual, that is as a citizen. Second, of course, my current role as a director of Legasis. And third, of course, which was my past role as an enforcement officer or a regulatory officer. Now, when I hear all this talk that is going on about environment and climate change, and
Yeah, I think is bit frozen. Coming back to you, Modak sir, I think is a very important element which Dr. Ajay Deshpande touched upon was the criminal liability part. While we will come back to that later on, but you look at section 166, and 166 puts environment and equates it with a person who is a stakeholder of the company. Now, if you look at the first part of 166, which talks about saying that the directors are required to act in good faith in the interest of the company. A company is a corporate person, an entity legally capable of being sued and capable of suing. So it has a perpetual suction and it is a person there. Second, it says it acts to act for the benefit of its shareholders or members, it says. So to that effect, those are the persons who are identified as persons capable of being sued and suing. Then it says it has to act in the interest of its employees, its community, members of the community. And after that, it comes out with this phrase, and in protection of environment. Now, environment today is no person. While you still have other people who are identifiable stakeholders in the company. You see, my predicament is this phrase that is coming in there, the manner in which it is introduced, is it defeating the purpose? Because, sir, if you treat environment as, or equate environment protection with that of working in the benefit of the shareholders, I think that priority that would be given for actions of the companies which are for protection of the environment, including ESG reporting, would require no other regulatory framework or a statutory legislation. It may still come by way of a guidelines which SEBI is issuing, or it may still come by way of a disclosure reporting. But the statutory fountainhead for then environment or ESG reporting ought to be this provision under the Companies Act. Is there anything where environment is being equated with persons? Is there, because environment protection constitutes an action, whereas stakeholders are different.
Can I come in on that?
Sure, sir. Sure.
Yeah, I think you make a very valid point, because if we really see, the environment has been very well defined under the Environment Protection Act, and it is always an elephant in the room. That's always the point. And also in various judgment, it has been treated as a party in absentia, actually. And NGT has to take care of environment when the debate or any discussions or arguments are going on. So environment has been considered in a very holistic way rather than an individualistic way. That is one important. And there are different facets of environment. Environment is too big a word to really comprehend very easily. It talks about the natural elements and the anthropogenic elements, and then the interaction of each of them. So it's really very complex definition of environment. So I understand that, and that's why actually, if you see the environmental regulations which are coming up, the onus is on the development agency or industry in a particular case to prove that his actions are environmentally benign. The development is sustainable, and also he is going to take sufficient care of that. And at the same time, if you see the other side of the coin, under the public trust doctrine, they are authorized to cause some level of pollution. Okay, So what is basically environmental clearance or environmental consent or permit? It is nothing but an authority to pollute. And that authority has been given considering the overall environmental status of that area. So to my understanding, if an industry is talking, or a role of an industry has to be checked, it has to be viewed in terms of those commitments. The industry cannot be responsible. Suppose there is an industry in an industrial area, it individually cannot be accountable for all the environmental status of the industrial area. He may be accountable for what he's doing. So I think that the point you are making has to be viewed in view of this two principles, the public trust doctrine as well as the role of the developmental agency.
No, sure, sir. I think I tend to agree with you on one point, which is the public trust doctrine, and therefore fiduciary responsibility being equated under the director's duty under 166. So, sir, very interestingly, I would like to then relate this back with the liabilities there that started from the environment protection perspective, or let's say this jurisprudence started developing in India post Bhopal gas tragedy, and therefore the question starts coming back to me again in terms of saying that what is the responsibility of the corporate, what is the liability of a corporation, and therefore the directing mind behind the corporation being directors responsibility and liability. Sir, and I think we're missing Ramesh Sharma, otherwise we will take this up subsequently when it comes on the criminal liability side as to what happened in Bhopal gas tragedy and what is the current status of the criminal action there. But sir, coming back to the civil liabilities, I think we all know that the matter went up to the Supreme Court in terms of what the compensation ought to be and how it progressed there. So when it came to civil liabilities, sir, in Bhopal gas tragedy, Supreme Court couldn't lay down any law because the matter was virtually settled thereafter. It took DCM Sriram case to kind of decide, saying there ought to be a strict liability and that the liability ought to be unlimited in that sense.
Absolute.
Limit of liability, it's an absolute liability. It's an absolute liability, and when it comes to criminal mind, I think mens rea, etc., is immaterial, and we'll come back to the criminal liability. But sir, when we talk about civil liabilities and the responsibility of the directors, okay, now directors fail to act in a particular manner is a clear-cut case when we talk about Bhopal gas tragedy and fastening absolute liability. So it would go beyond merely compliances, as Dr. Modak said. Sir, my point is that therefore, the theory about absolute liability, does it also get fastened to an extent onto the directors of the company? In short, support entity in a given matter comes to the conclusion that the polluter ought to compensate and pay. So, suppose that polluter is in an IBC today. Its directors who at a relevant point failed or derelicted in their duty, or there is a dereliction of duty when it comes to 166. Would you then go on to fasten liabilities, civil liabilities and compensation onto the individual directors? Because otherwise, suppose, sir, let's take an example where there is a minorities operation. If a similar case were to arise there, the directors who took the decision will be individually liable. Let's take an example of a fraud under the Companies Act. The directors who were responsible at the time of fraudulent action, we all know that even at the interim stage, independent directors' personal properties have been attached by the courts till such time that the matters got resolved. So to that effect, for a violation of the Environment Protection Act, therefore, would the liability get fastened onto the director?
Yeah, I think there are some judgments where the NGT has issued orders not only against the company, but in case the company fails, and in case the company cannot raise the resources which have been ordered as a liability, then directors' involvement has been ordered in some of the judgments. I don't think whether it has been finally settled at the Supreme Court, but definitely logically even in NGT Act. Just before that, actually, if you really see the concept of liability in the Indian environmental regulation or legislations, the regulations were silent till the hazardous waste regulation really came in. If you see Rule 25 of the 89 rules of hazardous, it has two components. One is it gives complete liberty to the State Pollution Control Board to charge the damages based on the hazardous waste pollution or any degradation. But surprisingly, Section 2 talks about the penalty on the polluter, which was limited to only 1 lakh rupees. And that too with the process of approval of getting And the other regulation never had a civil application procedure or civil liability procedures. There are some references about remediation, like in Air Act Section 24 or Water Act. It is a polluter's risk that Pollution Control Board can construct the sewage treatment plant and all that. But the NGT Act really fills that gap, and it has a special provision of Section 15 where the compensation, remediation, restoration, all these terms have been put in one basket and given NGT a very quite open hand to deal with this particular subject. And there also the orders are liable against the company, and the recovery has to be as a revenue procedures.
Correct.
Yeah.
Sir, sorry to stop you there. You see, Bhopal gas tragedy actually opened and created an unlimited liability as a consequence of any hazard to the environment happening where there is a public interest at large or third parties getting damaged. The NGT provisions that are limiting it in a manner, because statutorily it's kind of putting certain limits, is in that sense a welcome step for the companies. Because, sir, I'll tell you, you may come out with a reasonable manner in which remediation has to be done according to Section 15 of NGT and come out with some formula in which you are limiting the liability. Whereas Bhopal gas tragedy opened that question, and we all know, sir, including the CTBT or the nuclear rules that came in subsequent to CTBT, predominantly nobody was willing to supply to India any nuclear reactor, because Bhopal held the fort under the common law torts, whichever way you look at it, to say that there ought to be unlimited liability in the event of such hazards. Don't you think NGT in that step is a step backward compared to what the common law held?
I really don't think so in that way. If you theoretically put that way, okay. But practically, the NGT Act doesn't prohibit considering the penalties in some sort of deterrent action also. So deterrence is one factor which has come up in various judgments time and again. And there is also like something what we call it is Al Gore's, if you see the economic instruments and all that, where actually the repeat offenders and all other like common tort, all the factors can always be considered by NGT while the liability principle is being considered. But at the same time, let me tell you something, like environmental remediation and restoration is a really costly affair, really costly. It requires huge time, resources, and with a lot of uncertainty again. But finally something will clean up. Like we are talking about Ganga Action Plan, we are talking about clean air, clean cities, municipal solid waste. Take example of this. And if you take a case of Bichri now, just very famous, the groundwater pollution, it's really difficult to remediate. Theoretically, it is possible, but if you really consider the cost of remediation, I don't think it will be not less than what we consider under absolute liability principle.
Point taken, sir. I completely agree with you.
And one thing, in fact, which is again coming up, is we are not even today considering the ecosystem approach, or if we consider biodiversity losses, and like there are multiple heads which are now opened up with better understanding when we calculate the environmental damage. And I think it may be more deadlier than the absolute liability incoming.
I hope so. I hope so. The jury is out there, and probably now you are part of the jury. So I'm saying we have a great hope to get this right, sir. I completely agree with you. I'm going to revert back with Ramesh Sharma, sir. Sorry, Ramesh, we lost you.
Sorry, my bad. I got some bad signal. Yeah, please.
But sir, coming back to the first opening remarks that you were going to kind of articulate, and secondly, I would want to touch upon a bit about the criminal liability, because if this is a fiduciary duty of a director, while we will discuss on the civil liabilities, how do you fasten it onto individuals so that the protection of the environment comes to the forefront and violation of the compliances become deterrent enough. But sir, your continuation on opening remarks and thought on criminal liability.
Thank you, Swaz. So as I was saying, I'm reminded of Gandhiji when he talked about, that heavy industrialization, heavy urbanization, all are going to lead to this kind of problem. There was a lot of foresight involved there. And today, unfortunately, we have only one model of economy available, and that is this capitalist or liberal economy where, the central point is how much money you can make. Like Gandhiji himself said, there is enough resources in this earth for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. So it is greed that is one of the main causes that is driving this financial world, so to say, as of now. And therefore, he had propounded the concept that, those who create wealth, they are actually the trustees as far as the community is concerned, society is concerned, because they draw a hell of a lot from the societies. They draw the manpower resources, they draw the raw material. Everything is that society contributes to your contribution of wealth, which something in some sense even Marx had touched on. So that was my opening remark as an individual. I personally feel that this concept of climate, and as an individual, I feel I should contribute in whatever manner I can within my own home, within my own washroom, within how much water I can save. That's at an individual level. At the director's level, of course, we'll have a little discussion because you have plunged me directly into the criminal liability. Well, I did my research on that, and I went to the site of National Crime Record Bureau, which is the custodian of all the data of crimes that are recorded in India. And I came across some very interesting observations. Observations that I would like to make. I got statistics of 2018 to 2020 of all the environment, related offenses. Now, environment-related offences, have been taken as cigarette and other tobacco-related acts, the Forest Act and the Forest Conservation Act, the Air Act and the Water Act, and the Noise Pollution Act, the National Green Tribunal Act, and of course the Environment Protection Act. So these are the laws that have been considered by the NCRB. 2018, there were 35,196 cases that were registered. 2019, to 34,676 cases were registered, slightly down. And 2020, there were 61,767 cases registered. So it's almost like not double, but almost there, double. And the rate of violation of committing the offense is 4.6 per 1 lakh population. The good part is that the charge sheet has been almost 99% because these are easy cases to be investigated and the evidence is there. But what is very remarkable when I went a little deeper into the statistics, and these are statistics of 28 states and 8 union territories. So we are talking about a huge piece of land. And when I looked at the 2020 offenses, I find that there were total number of cases that were registered by 61,767, as I said. But out of that, almost 49,710 cases were of cigarette and other tobacco-related acts. So, in effect, if we say round up everything and we say out of 61,800 cases, for example, 49,800 cases are of cigarette and tobacco act. That leaves us barely with 12,000 cases. And when we come to actually the Environment Protection Act, which is the core act, there are 992 cases that have been registered in the whole year. Now, this brings me to a very interesting point. I mean, so these are the cases that are registered in the police stations. And these are, one thing very good is that there are 99% charge sheeting. But the point that I want to make, I might as well make it now, is that police is overburdened. I mean, they would rather, they will have to take care of murder cases and dacoity cases and robbery cases and rape cases than actually going into and looking into Environment Protection Act cases and environmental relation cases, which would be very, very, last almost toward the end of their priority list. In that sense, I'm throwing this question open to the eminent panelists here. Just like we did for the Terrorist Act, for example, we created an agency called National Investigating Agency. And this power that was there with the CBI was taken away and given it to the NIA, National Investigating Agency. Similarly, we created an institution of SFIO to investigate cases as far as the Companies Act is concerned. I personally feel that looking at these statistics, and these are from the government portal, I feel there is a need now to create a separate investigating or enforcement agency at the national level as well as the state level to bring about any credible level of deterrence. And deterrence, whether we like it or we don't like it, whatever we might decriminalization, we might be doing it, that it has its own merits. But as far as environment is concerned and the kind of commitment that India has made in COP26 of 45% reduction of carbon emission and 40% of electricity being non-fossil fuels. So we have made huge commitment to the world community. And for that, I think deterrence is a very, very important, of course, apart from the awareness part of it, which we are doing here. And I think time has come when a separate agency has to be created, and both at the state level and at the national level, to ensure that people don't take the environment so lightly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I think I just had some very interesting discussion last week, and it seems that the government thought process is you have a problem, you create an institution and throw to solve it. Okay, so we will come back to that.
I gave you the statistics, so
sir, for 992 cases in an annual manner, if you want to create an independent agency at a national level, I think there's something missing here. Sir, because the 992 cases probably is not a representative of the fact that the environmental crimes are happening in a much larger scale outside.
Absolutely.
That is the point, sir. So the empirical evidence in terms of number of cases may not make out a case for having a environment investigating authority, let's say.
No, but that when because of the pressure, a lot of cases don't get registered also.
Yeah.
That's also a fact.
Absolutely.
And I'm willing to accept it.
No, sir, sorry, sir, you're saying something.
Yeah, in fact, if I just say something on that, because if you see traditionally under the Water and Air Act, there was no civil adjudication process, and only way out was to file a regular criminal case, and the Pollution Control Board official was authorized to file the case. So FIR route was normally not followed by the pollution control boards. In some cases where some public agitation is there or something is there, this is one of the way where the pollution control, but 99% of the cases, at least in Maharashtra, never reached the police station. It was directly coming to the court through the pollution control. But after a new introduction of a new section, Section 31 in Air Act and Section 33A in Water Act, the boards were given a very unique power of closing down the industry straight away.
Establishment. Yes.
And also disconnect the water and power supply. So that power was really a deterrent. It was a industry was really worried about that. And then gradually the pollution control board started using that power coupled with fiscal guarantees. So if some improvement is there, okay, you give guarantees and then so the dependence on the criminal cases was really going down. In fact, I just think in last 10-15 years, there are hardly few cases which have been filed, except where some directions are coming from the court or from some litigation or some. So use of these directions is proving sort of an alternative for the criminal prosecution.
Sir, I completely agree with you, and I subscribe to the fact that you see what has happened is, if you look at Bhopal gas tragedy itself, sir, the criminal appeals are still pending at appeal level 2. Out of 11 accused, 2 accused are dead. We all know one of the accused has been ex-chairman of a very large corporate group in India, which is today a very reputed group, so to speak. Or it was even then a very reputed group, but that chairman has also been prosecuted. Therefore, business understand, and it's even from a compliance professional perspective, it has been our experience that at times businesses go beyond criminal liability. They're not bothered about criminal liability. What they are bothered about is the business continuity. What they understand, if their license is getting revoked, they need to worry. And I think Sterlite has been a case when actually Supreme Court granted 100 crore worth of penalty and said, now you pay 100 crore and start the plant. You should have seen that day, so the stock prices moving up because they said now there will be production and now the economy will take over the shutting down of the company or their establishment. So the business understands the business continuity much better than criminal liability. I completely take that point. But sir, what business ought to understand, and this is where I think Section 166 ought to make the difference. And that's where I'm going to come back to you, Modak sir. Is that companies understand the economy. Companies understand what is in their interest. And if the environment protectional duty is coupled together with the economic interest of the company, including the fact that when we talk about circular economy, when you talk about how do you reduce the waste, how do you increase your bottom line through these measures, and how do you make your business sustainable? Sir, why are we not using Section 166 and 166 mandate, so to speak, a statutory mandate for the directors to act in the interest of the environment protection? Because that makes a phenomenal argument going even beyond business continuity rules. Sorry, sir, you're on mute.
Yeah, no, I think this has been a very interesting discussion. So I will respond to your question, but also take few points which Sharmaji made and also Ajay you talked about. So first of all, that term if you look at in terms of what is expressed in 166, when we say environmental protection, it actually means it's not a limited responsibility of that company, but the direction to the signal is given to the director to look beyond as a collective responsibility, because environmental impact or environmental risk is not to be solely restricted to that company's business. In other words, then the director should be in a position to understand the context on much larger sense and not limiting only to the company that he's sitting on the board. But I would like to expand that further, that today the responsibility is also to be looked at from the supply chain related compliances. And this is many times was overlooked.
Okay.
And many of the both financial and reputational risks are arising because not a proper management of the supply chain in the interest of environmental protection. So if I were to interpret the term environmental protection, not only it is expanding the scope and bringing in the concept of collective responsibility, it can be sectoral as well, but it can also now look at the supply chains. So this is one important message. Now, in terms of violations, one is that you violate the stipulated standards, but the one you have been mentioning about Bhopal, and for that matter, any other spills like British Petroleum, BP's spill, are those abnormal situations. and I will escalate them to emergent situation. And that is where there are huge financial implications apart from business interruption. And therefore, the argument which is made when you deal with assigning the responsibility at the individual capacity of the director for financial frauds is, according to me, should be equally applicable to such instances. That's the point number one. Secondly, many of the directors are not well informed or educated about the interpretation of 166 in the manner we are discussing, and therefore that needs to be done absolutely. Now that could be done by IOD or any other institution, but directors will need to be well aligned to this interpretation and their increasing responsibilities. And that being missing, you therefore find that there are lapses and there are incidences of non-compliances. And as I said, emergent situations are not anticipated and not well managed. So that takes us to one more dimension when there is a deliberate attempt to do environmental damage in the business interest. And correct me, Sharmaji, Maharashtra was the first state, Ajay, if you recall, we had a DCP for environmental crimes. Maharashtra was the first state, and my memory goes, it was Hemant Karkare who was put in charge, and he used to come and take my advice those days. When Raigad was chemicalized and the industries were merrily dumping the sludges into the farms, and the farmer would find early morning that his entire farm is chemicalized. Now, this is a different dimension where the company is taking deliberate steps. See, earlier non-compliances to standards is one issue.
Correct.
But if it doesn't, for example, if the company fails to have a pollution control equipment, it's much more a severe situation than occasional non-compliances because of improper operation. The second tier is that the company never set up a management system and a disaster risk, anticipatory, or as we call emergency preparedness plan. And therefore, these abnormal incidences are not well articulated or managed. And the third level is this deliberate attempt. I'm coming to that, and this is extremely important in today's context. And there, I would very squarely go for individually placed liabilities, and no shielding should be done at that point of time, just the way SFO is functioning. And therefore, the point, Sharmaji, you talked about bringing in on board another mechanism to deal with these environmental crimes, I think it's worth visiting. Now, countries like Egypt have environmental police. I don't know, you are all aware.
France has, yeah.
Environmental police. Now, how effective that environmental police is a different question. But they have conceived that apart from pollution control board equivalent, they have a department which is environmental police. So this takes to the point what Sharmaji you talked about, that then somebody may take a view that already basic system is not necessarily working well. What will happen with this? But we need to push this agenda that you have therefore a offense looked at from criminal perspective. And I think, correct me Ajay, but any incidences on the account of failure on protecting human safety under the Factories Act has a very severe punishment of non-bailable orders for imprisonment. And I know there are incidences happened in some of the well-reputed groups as well. So my point to end on this note, Suhas, is you need a danda. And I think we have to do it, because otherwise, this will be always, we will take always a little bit softened approach, on civil liabilities. But I think we need to take it ahead when you see these deliberate and consistent violations happening. I think we have to distinguish that.
So I'm going to revert back to Mr. Ramesh Sharma, sir. Therefore, the habitual nature of the offender is coming in here. to say that if there are deliberate attempts on behalf of the company or by the company and they continue, then at some point in time, you need the directors to be responsible. You need to invoke 166 in the event of their failure to discharge their fiduciary duty under 166 and getting converted now to the statutory duty. Sir, I mean, you have always articulated that the law enforcement agencies are not adequate today to deal with various offenses, including their core offenses. Now, independent agencies such as environmental police, or let's say a department being formed at the state level to look at environmental crimes, could probably be one idea. But, decentralizing it in terms of saying that, why don't we have mechanism at the company level where it's director's responsibility to make sure that the environment protection happens? In a sense, sir, if we are talking about ESG and supply chain and everything coming in terms of disclosures and reporting, if the directors themselves are today empowered. See, today, when it comes to fraudulent act within the company, I think there is a norm. If it goes beyond 1 crore, which is a threshold which is low compared to large companies having large turnovers also, 1 crore worth of fraud needs to be reported to SFI. Is it a time now to look for the boards to look at if there are habitual environmental crimes? You need to set up a system by way of which you report to SFIO, because it would be violation of the Companies Act provision under 166 if they don't do. Has the time come for all of us to go back to the directors to say this needs to be done?
Is that for me, Suhas?
Yes, sir.
Very, very interesting. You've gone and caught the tail in the roundabout manner. I mean, as Mr. Modak rightly said, let's face it, this is India. And, deterrence is something that is, you cannot wish it away. Whether the cases, in fact, on the contrary, when I talk on various subjects like fraud and bribery and corruption and all that, and in my book also, Combating Corruption in India, I mean, this itself is a very big punishment that the case carries on for 20 years. I mean, the West and the USA are much better because they can have a plea bargain. They can immediately settle their cases. They can pay their way out. And, it's done in a very quick manner of time. But unfortunately, we don't. I'm not praising the laggard manner in which the criminal justice system is working. Not at all. On the contrary. I'm saying this is the byproduct. This is the byproduct of a defective or of a very slow and in tatters criminal justice system, is that it also acts as a big deterrent. Because if you are caught, your entire youth is gone. Your entire 2 decades of your life is gone. And I will not buy this argument, Suhas, that the business people don't care about criminal cases. I mean, that's not my experience. It's not, let me finish. Once a case is registered, it means going to the police station. It means, hiring a lawyer. It means going to the court. And then, there are dates and dates and dates and dates. It makes your life miserable. The reputation is gone. The tensions is there at the personal level, at the family level, at the company level. So, it acts as its own deterrence. But I'm not going into that. I went into this aspect only because of this reason. When I saw that, terrorism was taken away because it was a major issue that had come up in front of India. And today, I mean, while terrorism is such a huge issue that can destabilize national security, I mean, maybe the environment or climate change may not destabilize the sovereignty of this country, but definitely we are not going to live long. I mean, it's a basic question of survival. And therefore, something as radical as that of creating a separate agency, it need not be a police agency. I'm not saying it is, I'm trying to, propound that I'm being a cop, so therefore it should be it can be a civilian agency. But some kind, I mean, of course, a lot of thought will have to go into it. And I said both at central and state level, because at some level, whatever be the matrix, as you have now put it across, that if it is a habitual thing or the directors themselves, like we do it in in the case of frauds, when it is over 1 crore, you report it. We can develop a matrix as to where such reportings can take place. And we can have special courts or special tribunals where such matters are resolved. I'm saying this to us again and again because I'm worried. I'm worried because the kind of commitment that we have made in COP26 and the kind of progress that we are seeing from day to day, I'm seeing it personally at my individual level. I do not know whether we'll be able to meet those commitments at all. I mean, even in the cases of, for example, National Green Tribunal, it's a fantastic development that happened in 2010. 12 years have elapsed. And again, forgive me for saying so, but I again went into the website and had a look at the cases instituted. 37,766 cases have been instituted. 35,405 have been disposed of. And only 2,361 cases are pending, which means there is only 94% disposal, which is excellent. But again, when I go deeper into this, I find that if there are 5 zones, as far as the tribunal is concerned, and if you go and break it up, 12 years divided by 38,000, let's say, by 12, and then it comes to 3,147 cases per year. And if we divide it by 5 zones, it comes to 699 cases per zone. So, I mean, do we really, I mean, this is the question I raised even in my book about combating corruption. Are we really serious? Are we really, are these statistics over, and these are statistics of not 1 year or 2 years, these are statistics of 12 years. Are we really paying the attention that we should be paying? Or how do we do it? I mean, thanks to the activists, thanks to the RTI, a lot of cases are coming up thanks to the, cases in the Supreme Court under 226 litigations. All that is there, but is it enough? That is my worry. I mean, and I'm looking at from the regulatory point of view, from the enforcement point of view, and from the government point of view as to, I mean, I hope we don't bite the dust and we fall flat on our noses, that we will not be able to achieve our target. These are the kind of thoughts that are there in my mind.
No, sir, I think at one level, I personally believe, at least on the SDG, it's a lost cause. By 2030, I don't think we will be achieving the targets on SDG. Dr. Modak may have a different perspective, but sir, my personal view, at least when it comes to SDG, I think we seem to have lost the battle. Of course, we'll need to create different injections, and we will kind of need to create different interventions. But sir, coming back to this issue in terms of at India level today, nothing seems to be enough. In a sense, we need to do everything, whether we talk about criminal liability, whether we talk about civil liability, whether we talk about absolute liability, whether we talk about fastening liability onto the individuals at the corporate level. I think, sir, nothing seems to be enough to stop the rogue elements from damaging the environment. At the same time, I think there are very few cases in which I can say that with the same conviction, saying nothing stops from a good environmentalist sitting at the board level in trying to do something meaningful, whether through ESG supply chain diligences, whether through ESG reporting, whether through sustainability reporting. At both the levels, nothing seemed to be enough, sir. Is that right perspective, Dr. Modak?
I'm not that pessimistic at the moment.
As a lawyer, I'm a bit cynical as well, sir.
Well,
Yes.
well,
So
even
I'm
though
not
when
a
I'm a
lawyer.
cop, I'm also not that pessimistic. I mean, to raise these issues is good because
You
we can
see-
deliberate and find answers.
See, we will never see Suhas a perfect circle. So it's a process. Now, timing is the more important issue, that, to reach a certain level of maturity, target and responsibility, if it is going to take us 40 years, then we are not going to survive. So we do need to have some targets and a time frame. And while many people use the word transition, to net zero, according to me, it is transformation. It's not transition. Because if you don't use this term transformation, the transition word looks like a glide, something gliding down. But this is different. We are late. So we really have to look at transformation. Many years ago, I don't know, Ajay, you remember this. We came with a concept, Suhas, what is called as a minimum environmental care size of the business. The fundamental argument was, if the business has to be in the interest now, looking back, in 166 on environmental protection, some businesses intrinsically cannot discharge that expectation. So if I'm going to start a business in an agro residue paper making facility, less than 20 tons capacity, I just cannot do black liquor recovery, right? So no bank should finance a plant of less than 20 TPD. So this is where I would call was a important upstream thinking. I'm telling you, this was a subject I dealt with the government in 1986, 40 years.
Yeah.
And when I talked about it in CII, I still remember there were not many supporters of this concept. The challenge, therefore, is we let such businesses come up, then we bring them environmental expectations, which they cannot comply. Then we get into litigation or closures. Why can't we do forward thinking so that the scale permits better technologies? And then the challenge is, how do you bring capital infusion? How do you set up a market for that kind of a business on a larger scale? Well, those are much easier issues to address than closing a unit because it was not on the right scale.
Yeah.
So then I would come back to what we were talking about, directors' responsibility. So do you see such visionary directors at all today?
Yeah.
That's the challenge.
No, thank you very much. Sir, I've been reminded saying we are probably running out of time. I think it's a topic where I think we can, it's so thought-provoking that we can go on and on. But I'm going to come back to each one of you on just like we had the opening remarks. I think just the last words. If we were to decide on the World Environment Day, to give a message to every director of every company in India, what would that be? I'm going to start with you, Dr. Modak.
You want to start with me?
Yes, sir.
Organize a training program for the directors.
So awareness seems to be your...
Not just awareness. Not just awareness.
Okay.
You have to be more skilled. You see, many of the boards I go and speak, where I find the directors understand the ethos, but to come with very material decisions, they are not equipped. And that is, according to me, is a bigger problem. Sensitization is already there, honestly. There is no denial. They pick up the points right away. But then taking those sentiments into their company business actions, that is where I think is a gap. And so I would say that not only sensitize them, but equip the directors to understand the full canvas of legal implications, and more than legal implications, as a how would I say, taking that as an individual mission, taking that point of environmental protection.
Sure, sir. Thank you. Mr. Ramesh Sharma?
Well, Suhas, I'm reminded of Mr. Ernest Hemingway, and he wrote that book, For Whom the Bell Tolls. And one of the reporters, they thought he was very smart, so he asked Mr. Hemingway, "Sir, for whom the bell tolls?" You know, the bell tolls when somebody dies in the village. Right. So he says, "It tolls for you."
Okay. Very well said, sir. Very well said. So, thank you. That's the message.
So that's the message for me as far as the directors are concerned. It tolls for all of us. I'm me included. Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Ajay Deshpande ji.
Yeah, in fact, just to continue with what Dr. Modak said, I think the director needs to be informed that yes, the canvas of environmental compensation liability is bound to expand with the time, and maybe multifold type of thing. And it will be maybe a very common feature in coming days. At the same time, if we can not only think of compliance, but if we want to be competitive, the compliance will be first step. And I think if that economic instrument is just coupled with the compliance, that will be a great thing to do.
No, thank you very much, sir. Very, very interesting discussions. And I must say, I've enriched myself so greatly through this discussion. Thank you to you. I'm sure, I think everybody would kind of want to understand this more and better. Thank you very much once again. All the best on the occasion of World Environment Day. And thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Swaz. Thank you, Dr. Modak.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharma. Thank you all.
Thank you to all the panelists for your insight. It was surely an enriching session. As Dr. Deshpande sir emphasized on criminal liability at the very beginning, Ramesh sir gave us more insight on the same. How climate action is extremely essential and all of us need to have a wake-up call and go beyond compliances and take this forward in an effective manner by Dr. Modak was also a good reminder. Linking the Bhopal gas tragedy with respect to the topic of the session by Suhas sir and the panelists for their contribution on the same made the session extremely intriguing. Finally, the messages shared by the panelists for the directors are something which will surely fill the gaps accordingly. If there are any questions which have been unanswered by our panelists, it will be taken offline by them. Now, we have with us another set of keen guests who has joined us to give us a refresher of our duty to preserve the environment and keep everything in check. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Anvi Anuj Kaul, aged 9 years, who lives in Pune and is the daughter of Mr. Anuj Kaul, Associate Vice President, Compliance Legasis Private Limited. We also welcome Ms. Ira Dongre, aged 7 years, who also lives in Pune and is the daughter of Mr. Jaideep Dongre, General Manager, Compliance Legasis Private Limited.
Hello everyone, I am Anvi Anuj Kaul. I am 9 years old and here I am wishing you all a very happy Environment's Day. To make my Environment's Day more special and happy, I planted some plants and trees in my kitchen garden, and I wish and hope that you all will plant trees too. We celebrate World Environment Day on 5th June every year from 1972. Every year the theme is changed. So this year the theme is Only One Earth, which highlights the need to live sustainably in harmony with nature by bringing transformative changes through policies and our choices towards cleaner lifestyle. This year, the World Environment Day 2022 is hosted by Sweden. A green and clean atmosphere is important to live a peaceful and healthy life. We must stop and avoid using polythene and plastic bags and prefer eco-friendly items to save the atmosphere. We can easily save our environment for my generation in several ways by accepting and adapting a simple lifestyle, by promoting digital technology which will save more papers that are made from natural resources like wood. Save environment, save nature. Thank you. Why are they important? Because they are beautiful. They give us shade. They give us fruits. Important thing, they give us oxygen. So today I am planting basil tree.
Thank you so much, Anvi and Ira, for sharing your lovely efforts and thoughts with all of us today. Moving on, Let us take a moment to understand how ESG creates value for corporates and their stakeholders, and how aligning with the ESG principles will help the companies to expand the existing markets and provide new avenues for growth as part of their Blue Ocean strategy.
The world is changing, and so does the expectation of investors, consumers, employees, and other stakeholders. The impact experienced by A, climate change, and B, COVID-19 pandemic has been a wake-up call and brought a change in perspective towards operating a business. Today, the best way to conduct a business is focusing on its sustainability by adopting environmental, social, and governance practices. These factors evaluate businesses and countries on how far and advanced they are with sustainability. Let's understand factors under ESG with examples. First, the environmental factor. This covers how organizations impact and are impacted by climate change and broader environmental issues, including biodiversity. Given renewed efforts to combat global warming, cutting emissions and decarbonizing has become more important. Second is the social factor. This factor looks at how the company treats people and concentrates on issues such as employee relations and diversity, working conditions including child labor and slavery, inclusion of local communities, health and safety, as well as conflict management. Third is the governance factor. It covers the means by which a company is controlled and directed, most usually through a board of directors. Governance factors examines how a corporation policy governs itself via board diversity and structure, corruption and bribery, compliance and review, executive remuneration, donation and political lobbying, as well as tax strategy. The importance of ESG reporting. There are four main reasons why ESG reporting is important and should be carried on by businesses. First, it increases corporate transparency. Second, it strengthens risk management. Third, it promotes stakeholder engagement. And fourth, it improves communications with stakeholders. The evolution of ESG in India, followed by a series of events. ESG reporting started in 2009 as initial steps towards the concept of business responsibility reporting. Ministry of Corporate Affairs (MCA) issued voluntary guidelines on corporate social responsibility, and Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India issued guidelines for corporate governance for insurers in India. In 2011, the Ministry of Corporate Affairs issued National Voluntary Guidelines on Social, Environmental and Economic Responsibilities of Business. The reporting landscape changed since then and has come a long way with the introduction of Business Responsibility Reporting (BRR) in 2012, where SEBI mandated top 100 companies to file BRR based on National Voluntary Guidelines along with annual reports, which was then extended to the top 500 companies in 2015. In 2014, corporate social responsibility was mandated to be filed under CSR rules, and in 2017, integrated reporting was advised for top 500 companies which were required to prepare BRR. Then came the National Guidelines on Responsible Business Conduct (NGRBC) in 2019, which was mandated for the top 1,000 companies by market capitalization. The Business Responsibility and Sustainability Report (BRSR) has been introduced through a SEBI circular dated 10th May 2021. In May 2021, SEBI amended Regulation 34, Subsection 2, Subsection F of the LODR regulations to introduce the Brsr Framework to replace the existing Business Responsibility Report (BRR), which is mandatory for the top 1,000 companies to disclose annually ESG related information from financial year 2022-2023. Let's discuss Brsr Framework. Brsr is more of an exhaustive disclosure framework than BRR. It provides a uniform framework for ESG disclosures, with a detail that makes it possible to compare with organizations working in the same sector. The reporting under Brsr is made a mandatory compliance from financial year 2022-2023. It is crucial for companies to prepare themselves for the change. Brsr is an effective compliance and communication tool for a company's non-financial disclosure and is the next step in mandatory ESG reporting in India. The Business Responsibility and Sustainability Report Framework is aligned with 9 principles of National Guidelines for Responsible Business Conduct (NGBRC), and the elements reflect the thrust of the United Nations Guiding Principles (UNGP) on business and human rights and sustainable development goals, and yet remain true and specific to the Indian context. The framework of the reporting questionnaire. Section A, General Disclosures. This section contains details of the listed entity, products or services, operations, employees, holding subsidiary and associate companies, including joint ventures, CSR, transparency and disclosure compliances. Section B, Management and Process Disclosures. It contains questions related to policy and management processes, governance, leadership and oversight. Section C, Principle-wise Performance Disclosure. Companies are required to report upon KPIs in alignment with the 9 principles of the NGRBC. Let's look at the ESG regulations globally. United Kingdom adopted UK Sustainability Disclosure Requirements (SDR), will set out disclosure requirements for corporates, asset managers, and asset owners. The SDR will also include disclosure requirements relating to the forthcoming UK Green Taxonomy (UK Taxonomy). In 2021, the European Union adopted the Sustainability Finance Disclosure Directive (SFDR). The SFDR, together with a range of other EU sustainable finance initiatives. In Germany, on July 22, 2021, the Act on Corporate Due Diligence in Supply Chains, known as the Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, was published. The Act will enter into force on January 1, 2023. Its objective is to safeguard human rights and the environment in the global economy more effectively. It is very important for companies to establish a strong ESG program. Here are 3 steps on how you can do so. First, getting the basic rights. Second, strengthening the core. And finally, communicating the efforts. We have dealt with these 3 in greater detail in our ESG module available at ethicsindia.org. Some of the global reporting standards are Global Reporting Initiative Sustainability Reporting Standards, GRI, CDP's Climate Change 2020 Questionnaire and Water Security 2020 Questionnaire, CDP, International Organization for Standardization's Guidance on Social Responsibility, ISO 26000:2010, Recommendations of the Financial Stability Board's Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, TCFD, Climate Disclosure Standard Board's Framework for Reporting Environmental and Climate Change Information, CDSB Framework, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development's G20 OECD's Principles of Corporate Governance, G20 OECD, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. Let's look at 2 case studies which establishes the need for ESG reporting by companies. The first is the Coca-Cola Amatil case, that's CCL. As we know, the majority of its products are non-alcoholic but high in sugar. BT Investments predicted social risks around high sugar and its link to diabetes and obesity is crucial. Further, regulatory risks including potential imposition of sugar taxes in key markets. Next, the AGL Energy. It is an Australian integrated energy company. The company operates retail and merchant energy businesses, power generation assets, and an upstream gas portfolio. IFM investors held steady investment rate in AGL Energy despite ESG concerns. Climate change due to AGL's significant exposure to coal, as well as material financial impact on the environment related risks. Thank you, everyone. For further details, you may contact us on the email IDs or the contact numbers currently displayed on the screen.
From the session, we learned the various factors or steps with respect to ESG and how to put more focus on the same. Legasis is always there to support you in your ESG journey by our innovative ESG solutions. Let us proceed to our last segment where we see the vision of our future custodians. I welcome Ms. Ira Ravishankar, aged 3.5 years, who lives in Pune and is the daughter of Ms. Deepti Ravishankar, Senior Associate, Business Development, Legasis Private Limited. I also welcome Ms. Amira Mittal, aged 9 years, who lives in Sirsa, Haryana, and is the niece of Mr. Sulabh Mittal, General Manager, Compliance Solutions, Legasis Private Limited.
Happy World Environment Day.
Hello everyone, myself Amira. Today I want to speak some lines on World Environment Day. World Environment Day is biggest international day for the environment led by United Nations Environment Program held annually since 1973. Every year, World Environment Day is observed on June 5. This day is celebrated to encourage awareness and environmental protection. This day is celebrated by millions of people across the world. World Environment Day 2022 is hosted by Sweden. Only one Earth is comparative slogan with a focus on living sustainably harmony with nature.
Thank you, Ira and Amira. It was wonderful to share your thoughts and your ideas about the World Environment Day. Nature has been painting for us infinite pictures of beauty every day, according to John Ruskin. It is just that we fail to see what nature has to offer. It is for this reason that we have occasions like World Environment Day to remind us of what we are missing out. This day surely reminded all of us to strengthen the world and ensure that nature is preserved at all costs. I believe the event surely urged all of you to become active agents in developing environment safety methods. We should take the pledge to keep our nearby surroundings safe and clean so that everyone can have a cleaner, greener, and more prosperous future. Let us plan actions and ensure its implementation to ensure sustained life on only one Earth to make this World Environment Day memorable. I would also like to mention that Legasis, as the leader in automated compliance management solutions, has now embarked upon transformation to Legasis Next. Legasis Next comprises of data-driven digital solutions in governance, risk, assurance, compliance, and ethics, commonly known as GRACE, contracts and litigation management, known as CALM, intellectual property rights, services and solutions, IPRS. Before anything goes wrong, digital investigations and forensics sustainability solution, ESG and responsibility, which is B4EGW. With a greater awareness of ESG in business reporting, Legasis is keen to help organizations in ESG solutions. With this, we come to an end of today's event. It was an honor to hear Dr. Chitley as he shared his valuable thoughts. We look forward on how India is changing for the better, which will ultimately benefit our next generation. I thank all our panelists for sharing their experiences and making this session an impactful one. Lastly, let us all thank and appreciate the presence of the future custodians of Mother Earth, who took their little efforts in sharing their thoughts about the environment and their way to preserve the nature in a very creative manner. I also would like to thank all our audience members who stayed with us throughout the session. Lastly, on behalf of the entire Legasis family, I would like to thank Environmental Management Center LLP and our entire Legasis family who directly or indirectly contributed their part to make the event a successful one. Finally, wishing all of you a very happy World Environment Day once again, and thank you all, and I hope all of you have a wonderful day ahead.